Traditions that we inherited from Babylon through Constantine have us occasionally with a little plastic cup and a little round wafer in a church service having what is called communion. But Yeshua was not having communion with his disciples. It was the last meal before his crucifixion, which happened at the time the Passover lambs were being sacrificed the following morning. Yeshua took this opportunity to explain something that had been embedded in the Israelite culture for then over 1,000 years. Melchizedek brought forth bread and wine to Abraham, and he blessed the Most High, saying, Baruch atah Yehovah, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, ha'motzi lechem min ha'aretz. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Yeshua said, this represents my body, which will be broken for you. As often as you do it in remembrance of me. And so we break this bread and we do it in remembrance of him. Likewise, Yeshua took the cup and he blessed the Most High with that blessing that Melchizedek blessed the Most High. Baruch atah Yehovah, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, borei pari hagafen. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, the King of the universe, the creator of the fruit of the vine. Yeshua said, this represents my shed blood, which will be poured out for the remission of sin. I will not drink another drop of the fruit of the vine. You take my cup and divide it among yourselves, because I won't drink it until I drink it again with you in my Father's kingdom. The marriage supper of the Lamb, Yeshua will lift this cup and he will say, L'chaim, to life everlasting. And until then, we remember what he's done and remember that marriage supper of the Lamb. Get ready. Now, I would like you to turn to Yeshua's parable. This is the 2 days before his crucifixion. It is the 12th day of the month of the Aviv, and these are the final words, the final sparring with the religious leaders. And so we're going to Matthew chapter 22, verse 1, and that is where we're going to begin reading. Matthew chapter 22, one of the last parables that he speaks to the people gathered together there in Jerusalem, with hundreds of thousands. By this time, literally millions in Israel are gathered together for the feast of Passover. Yeshua spoke to them another parable and said, the kingdom of heaven is like to a certain king. Now, people think that when it says certain, that means it's a specific king. No, the word in Greek is anthropos, which is just a man. Yeah, and it's a figure of speech. It's not like it's a man king. It's just, it's a man, a king. Okay, the terminology is used whether it's a woman or a man. It's just a certain king. It could be a real person, or it could be, in this case, it says he speaks to them a what? A parable. Okay, there was a certain man named Lazarus, who was begged at the gate of this wealthy man. People say, well, a certain man, if he's a certain man, that means there really was a man named Lazarus. No, it's a parable. He's giving us a parable, which is a parallel of something in the physical world that has a parallel on the spiritual world. Something that a way to understand the spiritual realities because of this parallel on this world that we can all understand. Now, we know about a king. We know the authority of a king. So he said there was the kingdom of heaven is like to a certain king, which made a marriage for his son. He sent forth his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding, but they refused to come. Again, he sent forth other servants, saying to tell those who were invited, look, I prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fowlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the marriage. But they made light of it, went their ways. One went to his farm, another went to his place of business. The remnant took his servants and entreated them spitefully and killed them. When the king heard, he was absolutely furious. He sent his armies and destroyed those murderers, incinerated their city. Then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but they which were bidden are not worthy. Therefore, go into the highways, as many as you find, invite them to the marriage. So the servants went into the highways and gathered together all as many as they found, both bad and good, didn't discriminate. And the wedding was finally furnished with guests. When the king came in to see the guest, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. He said to him, friend, how is it that you came in without a wedding garment? He was speechless. Then said the king to his servants, bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Many are called, but few choose to respond appropriately to the invitation. See, the King James is a little hard there. Many are called, but few are chosen. No, many are called, but few choose to respond appropriately. This is the meaning of this. This is what this is saying. And so when the end comes, when anyone is invited, because we know and have a rough idea of what he's talking about, because we've got scribes and Pharisees, we've got religious leaders that are gathered there together at Jerusalem, but they do not want to hear the gospel of the kingdom. They don't want to hear what Yeshua has to say, but see, because he's telling them that their rules and regulations that they made up are absolutely against the Torah. This is completely the opposite of what Moses said. No one adds, no one takes away. The rules of the kingdom are the rules of the kingdom. You want to enter the kingdom, you go through the door. You don't go your own way. You don't make up your own way. I am the way. I am the door. I am the definition of the truth. If you want in, you've got to go this way or you can forget it. You're not coming in. And he says that they spitefully entreated his servants. He's talking about the prophets. He's talking about what's about to happen to him and what is going to happen. The temple will be destroyed. The Levitical priesthood in complete disarray. And there you have one of the layers of Daniel's prophecy. For the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. In that way, you know, the overspreading of abominations going on in the second temple period, the temple was made desolate by Yeshua, who was cut off in the midst of the week on a Wednesday. So, you know, there's more than one layer to Daniel's prophecy here, ladies and gentlemen. And he's saying that the armies, he's going to send his armies in and is going to kill them. He's going to burn the city down. And this is what happens to Jerusalem exactly 40 years from this date. Exactly 40 years, in the year 68 of the Common Era. Accurately detailed by Maimonides. In the year before the 380th Greek era, not the year 70, as we've been crammed down our throat by Rome, along with the 1 BC birth and a December 25th birthday, that finally the last pope, before he checked out, finally admitted that the whole thing was made up and it's not true. So, all these people are invited, and see, now this parable, I do not believe this parable is saying that come the time of the marriage supper of the Lamb, at the time, and let me give you this straight, because now we're gathered together on the sea of fire and glass, and the angels are pouring out the wrath of God upon the earth. When the last bowl is poured out, the cry goes out of the throne room, it is finished. And then the bride dresses herself in white garments, which are the righteous acts of the saints, and are ushered into the marriage supper of the Lamb. Now, this is very serious, ladies and gentlemen, and this is what I want to focus on for just a little bit. Here is the promise in verse 5. He who overcomes these things shall be clothed in white garments. So let's take a look a moment and see exactly what Yeshua says about this. So you take your chronological Gospels and turn to Revelation chapter 16 and verse 15. Revelation 16:15. Watch, I will come like a thief. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. See, that's almost a reiteration of what he's saying specifically to them. You have got to watch. I'm going to come like a thief, unsuspecting. And he's not talking about right here. Let me tell you what we're talking about here. This is when the wrath concludes and earth prepares for Armageddon. And this is a parenthetical expression here, where it says, watch, I will come like a thief, blessed he who watches and keeps his garment, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. Because if they're not robed in white garments, this figure is, they're not going to walk with Yeshua. So, when we come to the battle of Armageddon, all that has taken place, we see that what has transpired just before this are the 7 trumpets. The 7th and the last trumpet is when the righteous are raised and rewarded. His servants and prophets, small and great, are raised and rewarded, and he will now destroy those destroyers of the earth. So immediately after the 7th trumpet is introduced 7 angels with 7 bowls full of the wrath of Almighty God, which are poured out upon the earth, while up in heaven, those who have been gathered together are on the sea of fire and glass, which is the typification, was typified on the earth as the brazen laver. The brazen laver is where the priest walked up to it, this brazen laver that was made from the looking glasses of the women of Israel that were melted down, further refined, then polished. The priests could see themselves. If their garments were spotted, if their hands or feet had blood on them because of the sacrifices that they were doing, if they looked into this laver and saw that there was any blemish, then they were required to wash their hands and feet, both going to the altar and coming from the altar. If their garments were blemished, if their garments were bloodied and dirty, then they had to go change their garments because they were not fit to serve in the temple if their garments were soiled. And so the sea of fire and glass in heaven is the reality of this brazen laver. It is the judgment seat of Messiah. This is where we are gathered together on the sea of fire and brass. And it tells us this, that when this innumerable multitude is gathered on the sea of fire and brass and glass, that the doors in the Mishkan in heaven open up and out belches fire and smoke and lightning and thunder. And an angel cries out, no one can enter the tabernacle until the wrath of God is poured out. And now these 7 angels walk across the sea of fire and glass and pour out one after another the wrath of God upon the earth. Now who is subjected to the wrath to come? Those who are not gathered together. I want to read you Revelation chapter 19. Revelation 19, verse 5. And I'm going to read this out of the New Version because that's what I have right before me, and everyone will soon have this. Revelation 19:5. This is the marriage supper of the Lamb. A voice came out of the throne room crying, Hallelujah! All his servants, all those who fear him, both great and small, praise Yahovah. Then I heard the voices of a great multitude like the sound of roaring oceans and like the sound of a mighty thunder, crying, Hallelujah! Yahovah Elohim El Shaddai reigns. Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, because the marriage of the Lamb has come and his bride has made herself ready. Who has made herself ready? The bride. Does it say Yeshua has made her ready? That Yeshua did all the work? No. It's the bride's job to get cleaned up. Make no mistake about it. He has paid the death penalty for the broken covenant for us. Now we are supposed to respond. Now it says, the bride was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for fine white linen is the righteous acts of the saints. In the Greek, it says the righteousnesses. In the, I believe it's the NIV, the non-inspired version, it says the righteous acts of the saints. That's accurate. It's great. It's the garments are the righteous acts of the saints. If you don't do anything, you don't get rewarded. Salvation is of grace. Reward is of merit. There can be nothing that is truer in all that Yeshua teaches. You know, if you're faithful in little bit, I will give you rule over 5 cities, over 10 cities. You will have responsibility if you do something. If you don't do anything with it, you just come forward and do a repeat after me in case this whole God thing is true, then even that which you have will be taken away from you. You can't bury it and think you're going to dig it up someday when you need it. No, you dig it up and he's going to rip it right out of your hands and say, you idiot. You knew this day was coming, and you still sat in your dead tuchus and did nothing your whole life. Blessed. Then the angel told me to write this, and so he writes it. Blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Then he emphasized, this is the true Torah of Yahovah. And I fell at the angel's feet to worship him, and he said, do not do this. I'm your fellow servant, the same as your brothers who have the testimony of Yeshua. Worship Yahovah. The spirit of this prophecy is the testimony of Yeshua. That's why you were told to write all this down, because it's a testimony of Yeshua that he wants his servants to know what's going to happen. This marriage supper of the Lamb is real. And if you are dressed in white, if you prepared for it, you are going to see that day, and it is such an incredible thing that John craters at the feet of an angel. It's like, it's too much for him to handle. He's told to write this, and he craters, he falls down on his face like a dead man in front of an angel, worshiping the angels. And angel, get up, get up. You're told to write this down, now write it down. You know, I've really been thinking this thing through my entire life to try to make this thing make sense. So I am going to propose that this is the picture that we are getting from Yeshua. That those who are gathered together at the last trump are the ones that are prepared, that are watching, who have cleaned up their garments. We know that the resurrection at the end of the 1,000 years, those whose names are written in the book of life, they will enter into the new heaven and the new earth. But how about those who did not get their wedding garments on, who are not positioned as the bride of the Messiah, who have not taken the talents given to them in this life and invested them and done something with them? These, Yeshua said, there will be with them weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth, which represents great remorse. It doesn't mean burning in hell forever. You know, that's not a picture that we see in the scripture. But we do see that there is remorse to those who had an opportunity, but yet didn't follow through. To those who were given talents and didn't do anything with them. And even that which they had was taken away. Those who did something is given rule, charge over 10 cities, over 5 cities. But the one who did nothing gets rule over nothing. What is it saying? Is it telling us that there will be those who think that they're followers of the Messiah, but really have done nothing? I want to take you to this verse in Revelation chapter 20, verses 11 through 15. This is the final day of judgment. This is the great white throne judgment. This is in, of course, Revelation chapter 20. This is after the 1,000-year reign of the Messiah. As a matter of fact, I think we'll back up here just a moment. Because, see, there are things that we have to understand in the end of the book of Revelation for the beginning to make sense. In verse 4 of chapter 20, then I saw thrones and those who sat on them. Authority to judge was given to them. I also saw the souls of those who were beheaded for the witness of Yeshua and for the word of Yahovah, those who had not worshipped the beast nor his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Messiah 1,000 years. See, that's a promise for those who go through this period of time, who do not receive the mark of the beast, who cannot buy and sell, who are beheaded for the testimony of Yeshua. They will live and reign with Messiah for 1,000 years. Does that say that every person that has ever gone forward in a Billy Graham crusade and got a free Gospel of John are going to live and reign with Messiah for 1,000 years? Not by any wild stretch of the imagination. Billy Graham didn't even believe that even 2%. He would have been happy if 2% of the people that walked forward, that it really meant something. 2%. He was under no delusion in that. And then it says, but the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. Who are the rest of the dead? Well, that would be those rank unbelievers. That would be, everything from, Muhammad to Stalin to Hitler to, any other, Mao Zedong, any other of these mass murders. And I think we could probably throw a few U.S. presidents and senators and a few mafia kings in on this one right here, okay? The rest lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection, speaking of those who lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. This is the first resurrection. Blessed is holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. In other words, blessed and holy. They've set themselves apart. They've gotten their garments cleaned up. The second death has no power over them. They shall be priests, Kohanim of Yahovah and of Messiah, and they shall reign with him 1,000 years. Again, what a great and precious promise to those who really do what they're told to do by Yeshua and are not just innocent bystanders. When the 1,000 years are expired, verse 7, Hasatan will be released out of his prison to go out to the four corners of the earth to deceive the nations again. Gog and Magog will be gathered with them to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. So even at the end of the 1,000 years, when Satan is bound and we're living and reigning and ruling upon the earth, Babylon and its system has been completely destroyed. Satan is bound, and yet at the end of it, Satan must be released for a short season. Now, who is he going to go out and deceive? Body and soul people who have lived through the wrath of the Almighty. There's going to be plenty of people who, when Yeshua is reigning in Jerusalem, come up to the worship the King, Yahovah Tzebaot. And if they don't come up and worship him, it's not going to rain on their country for a whole year. Who are these people? These are body and soul people who continue to live. They've had to drink blood for a little while. Okay, they've got 100-pound chunks of hail coming out of heaven, which if you get hit one of these, you're dead, okay? But, those who don't get hit by this, and, because this is, it is spoken of as the greatest trauma has ever been upon the earth. Hail, 100-pound chunks of hail, there's no place to run or hide. What will that do to a concrete skyscraper? It'll take it down. 100-pound chunks of hail? You bet your life. Traveling at what velocity? And so, those who lived through that will live for the 1,000 years. That's when a young child will die at the age of 100. And at the end of 1,000 years, we've got 20 generations of people removed from when their parents were ruling the earth. And they're going to be then deceived by Hasatan, and they're going to think, hey, we're going to take over now. Well, it's going to be fruitless. Verse 9, then went up from the far reaches of the earth and encompassed the camp of the saints, the beloved city, and fire came down from Yahovah out of heaven and consumed them all. Then Hasatan, which deceived them, was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and false prophet were cast. And Hasatan shall be tormented day and night from age to age. And then, verse 11, I saw a great white throne, and he that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and they were never seen again. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and the scrolls were open, and another scroll was open, which is the scroll of life. The dead were judged according to their works out of the things that were written in the scrolls. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead that were in them. And every man was judged according to his works. Death and hell were then cast into the lake of fire, which is the second death. Whosoever was not found written in the scroll of life was also cast into the lake of fire. See, that is the last judgment, the last resurrection. See, in Corinthians, it tells us that every man who has ever lived will be made alive, but in his own order. Messiah, the first fruits. Remember when the earthquake, the rocks rent, the graves were open, and the saints arose when Yeshua rose and appeared to many in the streets of Jerusalem. And then the following morning, Yeshua told Mary to go tell my disciples that I'm going to ascend to their Father and my Father, and then to meet me in the Galilee. He ascended, taking the first fruit saints with him and put them in the throne room in heaven, and that's where the 24 elders come in, which are not seen before that time. Ezekiel doesn't see them. They are the first fruits from the earth. Messiah, the first fruits. After that, those who are Messiahs at his coming. Those whose garments are white, who are walking with him. Those also who have died, but have not received the mark of the beast. Those who have given their lives for him, they will be raised and rewarded and will rule with Messiah for how long? 1,000 years. When the 1,000 years in which Satan is bound and unable to deceive the earth, when those 1,000 years are finished, Satan is released in a short time. He gathers together the armies of the world to converge on Jerusalem. Fire comes down out of heaven, incinerates the heavens and the earth. As Peter said, the elements will burn away with a fervent heat. And then there is the final judgment that is set, and every man who has ever lived is going to stand before the throne of the Almighty. See, when Yeshua said to the robber, the evildoer on the cross, verily I say unto thee today, thou shalt be with me in paradise. See, that person does not qualify to live and reign with the Messiah for 1,000 years. But paradise is what he promised him. What is paradise? Paradise was terminated. It was the Garden of Eden. The word Eden, gone, garden, translated into Greek is paradosis, paradise. Paradise is terminated and does not appear again until the new heaven and new earth wherein paradise is restored. That robber will be with Yeshua in paradise in the future. Paradise does not exist yet. It was terminated and will be reinstituted. The tree of life we can no longer eat from. The tree of life will be in paradise, and the nations will dine from the leaves of the tree of life. And so we see that at that last resurrection, everyone who's ever lived will be made alive. And who is going to do the judging? Yeshua said, all judgment has been put in my hands. He told the Pharisees that he would be their judge. And so they better be careful how they treat him. He's going to be the judge one day. And so when Yeshua judges, he's going to judge out of the books, out of those scrolls, and those whose names are not written in the book of life will be cast into the lake of fire, where the devil and the false prophet were cast. So now we get a more full picture of this. And so finally, Yeshua concludes, as he says, he that overcomes these things shall be clothed in white garments. I will not blot out his name out of the scroll of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. And then he says, he who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the Kahila, to the assembly, to the believers. We are the ones who now kiss the Son and make up to him. Because we know that his wrath will be real, that there will be justice, and that justice will last forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. This is our call to get our garments cleaned up, to be obedient to these commandments that Yeshua lived and kept, the ones that Moses said no one has the authority to add to or to subtract from, the ones that Yeshua said heaven and earth will pass away, but one jot, one tittle, one vowel or consonant, as it says in the Hebrew Matthew, will not pass from the Torah till all is fulfilled. And ladies and gentlemen, until death and hell are cast into the lake of fire and there's a new heaven and earth, it's not over.